It all started with a locked door. I'd come home early that Friday, a little after 5:30 p.m. My wife, Lauren, had been working remotely for the past year. She'd picked up some marketing gig after deciding that staying home as a full-time mom just wasn't cutting it anymore. Most days, I'd walk into the house to the usual sounds of her voice carrying through the kitchen, either on a call or muttering to herself while typing furiously on her laptop. But that day was different. That day, there was nothing but silence. I remember standing there in the entryway, balancing a box of cupcakes in one hand. I'd grabbed them as a surprise for the kids, a little something to make the weekend feel special. The quiet hit me like a wall. Not a peaceful kind of quiet, this was heavy, uneasy. Like the house was holding its breath. "Lauren?" I called, my voice echoing too loud in the stillness. "You here?" No answer. That's when I felt it, that little twist in my gut. Something was off. Shaking it off as paranoia, I headed upstairs, thinking maybe she was in the bedroom taking a nap or wrapping up a late meeting. But as I climbed the stairs, I noticed something odd. The door to our bedroom was shut. Now, that might not seem strange to most people, but in all our 12 years of marriage, that door was almost never closed. We weren't the kind of couple that needed locked doors unless someone was sick or getting dressed. And yet here it was. Closed. And locked. I knocked lightly. "Lauren?" I called, leaning my head closer. Nothing. "Lauren, you okay in there?" I knocked again, louder this time. There was a pause. Then her voice floated through the door, muffled and thin. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just finishing something up. Be down in a minute." Her words didn't sit right. Finishing something up? At 5:30 in the evening? I thought to myself. My pulse quickened. I tried to keep it light. "What is it? Hiding Christmas presents or something?" I joked. She laughed, but it was the wrong kind of laugh. Too quick, too forced, like she was trying to smother something underneath it. "Yeah, exactly. Just don't come in, okay?" That twist in my gut turned into a knot. I stood there staring at the door, my mind spinning. Something wasn't right. I was sure of it. And then I heard it, a faint rustle, like fabric brushing against fabric. And a voice. Low, hurried. Definitely not hers. My heart sank. "Lauren," I said, my voice hardening. "Who's in there with you?" There was a beat of silence. Then a shuffle, like someone scrambling to move. My blood went cold. "Lauren!" I shouted, pounding on the door now. "Open this door!" Her tone shifted, sharp and defensive. "I said I'll be down in a minute, Mark." Mark. That was my name, but it didn't even sound like she cared anymore. I didn't think I acted. Grabbing the door handle, I yanked it hard, but it didn't budge. Without hesitating, I threw my shoulder against the door. Once. Twice. On the third slam, the lock gave way, and the door flew open with a crack. The scene on the other side stopped me dead in my tracks. Lauren stood frozen by the bed, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the mattress like it was the only thing keeping her upright. And next to her, half hidden behind the closet door, was a man. He couldn't have been older than his mid-30s, maybe younger than me. His shirt was crumpled on the floor, and he was wearing nothing but a pair of boxers. I stared at him. Then at her. Then back at him. My brain couldn't seem to process what my eyes were seeing. What the hell is this?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with fury. Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it again, like a fish gasping for air. But there was no guilt in her eyes. No remorse. Just annoyance. Like I'd walked in on her doing laundry, not this. "Mark," she said with a sigh, her tone exasperated. "You weren't supposed to be home yet." That one sentence hit me harder than any punch. Not, "This isn't what it looks like." Not, "I can explain." Just, "You weren't supposed to be home yet." The guy stammered, fumbling to grab his jeans off the floor. Look, man. I should probably go." "You think?" I snapped, taking a step toward him. He flinched, panic flashing in his eyes. Grabbing his clothes, he bolted out of the room like his life depended on it. And then it was just me and Lauren, standing there in the wreckage of whatever we used to be. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "How long has this been going on?" She crossed her arms and looked away. "Does it matter?" she said flatly. I felt like I'd been slapped. No apology. No shame. Just cold indifference. "Does it matter?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Are you kidding me? We have kids, Lauren. A family. And this is what you're doing while I'm at work." She rolled her eyes, her expression dripping with disdain. "Oh, spare me the family crap, Mark. You're never here. You work late. You barely talk to me anymore. And honestly," she paused, her lip curling, "you're boring. I needed more." Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. Boring. That's what I was to her. I'd been killing myself to provide for her, for our kids, for this life we built together. And I was boring? I stared at her, standing there like a stranger in our bedroom, and realized something I never thought I'd feel. I didn't recognize her anymore. Or maybe she never was. That thought hit me like a gut punch as I stood there in that room. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just turned around and walked out. No dramatic last words. No second glances. I headed straight to Max and Lily's rooms. My kids didn't deserve to be a part of this mess. "Pack a bag, guys," I told them, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're going on an adventure." Lauren didn't come downstairs. She didn't try to stop me. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. But by the time she returned from her little rendezvous later that night, laughing and carefree, we were already gone. And that was only the beginning. The 30-minute drive to the motel felt like it stretched on for hours. Max sat in the back seat next to Lily, who clutched her favorite stuffed unicorn like it was her lifeline. They were chatting about cartoons and their plans for the weekend, blissfully unaware of the hurricane roaring inside my chest. Every mile I put between us and that house felt like a brick crumbling from the foundation of the life I'd tried so hard to build. About halfway there, Lily leaned forward, her big brown eyes shining with curiosity. "Daddy, where's Mommy? Isn't she coming with us?" For a second, I couldn't answer. My throat tightened. How do you explain something like this to a 6-year-old? I gripped the steering wheel tighter and forced a smile. "Mommy had to stay home, sweetheart. This is just a special trip for us." Max, always the sharper of the two, wasn't so easily convinced. He narrowed his eyes and leaned forward. "Is Mommy mad at you? Did you guys have a fight?" His question hit me like a punch to the ribs. My son, my little boy, already knew to read the tension in a room. Already knew what a fight between parents felt like. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. But instead of breaking down, I smiled at him in the rearview mirror. "No, buddy. Everything's fine. Just sit back and enjoy the ride, okay?" When we pulled into the parking lot of a shabby little motel on the edge of town, Max scrunched up his nose. "This doesn't look like a fun trip," he muttered under his breath. I didn't have the energy to argue. I parked the car, got out, and checked us into a room with 2 double beds. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions, but the way she looked at me, sympathetic, like she'd seen this scene play out 100 times before, made me feel exposed. Vulnerable. Once we were inside the room, the kids dove onto the bed closest to the TV, squabbling over what channel to watch. I sat down on the other bed, staring blankly at the peeling wallpaper. My life had unraveled in the span of a few hours, and I couldn't make sense of it. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Lauren. Her first message was short and curt. "Where are you?" "Eric, this isn't funny. Bring the kids home." "Answer me. We need to talk." Talk? Now she wanted to talk? After everything? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the block button. But blocking her wouldn't fix this. None of this could be fixed so easily. I set the phone down, ignoring her texts. An hour later, the calls started. The screen lit up over and over again. 5 missed calls later, she left a voicemail. Eric, stop being dramatic. Bring the kids home. I don't have time for this. No apology. No concern. Just annoyance. I could picture her pacing in the living room, phone in hand, texting him, that guy, to complain about how unreasonable I was being. The thought made my blood boil. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to smash it to pieces. Instead, I shoved it into my pocket and turned to my kids. All right, guys, I said, forcing a cheerful tone. Who's up for pizza? Their faces lit up, and for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of relief. While we waited for delivery, I helped Max hook up his Nintendo Switch to the motel's ancient TV. Lily curled up on my lap, giggling about how she was going to beat her brother at Mario Kart. For a fleeting moment, it almost felt normal. Almost. The pizza arrived, and we ate cross-legged on the beds. The kids made up cheesy jokes, laughing so hard they had tears in their eyes. I laughed too, even though my mind was miles away. Every now and then, I glanced out the window, half expecting Lauren to show up. I didn't know what I'd do if she did. When the kids finally drifted off to sleep, I sat in the dark, staring at my phone. The weight of the situation pressed down on me like a boulder. This wasn't just about Lauren's betrayal anymore. This was about the life I wanted for my kids. For myself. I started scrolling through old photos, birthday parties, beach trips, lazy mornings at home. In every picture, Lauren was there, smiling like she was the perfect wife and mother. And for the first time, I wondered if any of it had been real. At 11 p.m., another text came through. You don't have the right to take them like this. Bring them back now, or I'll call the police. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and sharp. The police? For what? For protecting my kids from the mess she'd made of our lives? Let her call them. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Still, I knew this couldn't last. I couldn't stay hidden away in some dingy motel forever. She'd find us eventually. And I wasn't about to have that showdown in front of Max and Lily. I needed a plan, something concrete. I needed time to figure out how to make the separation permanent. So, I texted her back, keeping it short and cold. The kids are safe. I'll call you when I'm ready. Her reply came almost instantly. Jessica, you're overreacting. Don't do something you'll regret. Regret? Oh, I had regrets. Plenty of them. I regretted ignoring the signs, trusting her when I shouldn't have, and letting her mold me into some predictable, dependable guy while she snuck around behind my back. But regret leaving? Taking my kids and walking out? Not a chance. If she thought I'd come crawling back, she didn't know me at all. That night, I stared at the cracked ceiling of the motel room for hours, my mind racing. By morning, I had a plan. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Lauren thought she was in control, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. The game was just beginning. When the first light of dawn filtered through the dingy curtains, I looked over at Max and Lily. They were still tangled together under the scratchy motel blanket, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. They didn't know it yet, but their lives were about to change forever. I couldn't let them grow up in a house full of lies. And I damn sure wasn't going to let Lauren waltz back in like nothing had happened. I slipped into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Bloodshot eyes, clenched jaw, I looked like hell. But underneath the exhaustion was something I hadn't felt in years, clarity. Lauren thought she was clever, but she'd underestimated me. Twice. First by assuming I'd just roll over and accept her betrayal, and second by not realizing how far I'd go to protect what mattered. By the time the kids woke up, I'd already booked a small cabin by the lake, about 2 hours away. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was secluded and far enough to give me time to breathe and think. I told Max and Lily we were going on a mini vacation. They were too excited about the idea of a lake to ask questions. Lauren, of course, was relentless. As I packed up the car, my phone buzzed with a constant stream of calls and texts. I ignored every single one. But just as I was loading the last bag, my phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't Lauren. It was Kelly, her best friend. Kelly. Eric, what's going on? Lauren's freaking out. Can we talk? For a moment, I considered ignoring her too. But then an idea sparked. Maybe Kelly wasn't just another ally for Lauren. Maybe she could be the key to figuring out just how deep this went. I replied quickly. Me. Sure. Call me in 20 minutes. We hit the road shortly after. The kids were in the back seat, bickering over who'd get the biggest pancake when we stopped for breakfast. Meanwhile, my mind was spinning. Calculating. Planning. Right on cue, Kelly called. I turned down the radio, made sure the kids were occupied, and picked up. Eric. Her voice was cautious, almost hesitant. Hey, Kelly, I said evenly. Let me guess. Lauren sent you? She didn't send me, Kelly replied defensively. She's just worried. She said you took the kids without telling her. Is that true? I almost laughed. Did she also tell you why? There was a pause. No, Kelly admitted. She just said you were upset. And look, I'm not trying to take sides here. I just want to make sure you're okay. I'm fine. The kids are fine, I said firmly. But since you're so concerned, let me fill you in. And I did. I told her everything, the locked door, the guy in his underwear, Lauren's complete lack of remorse. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. You're kidding, Kelly finally said, though her voice didn't sound surprised. You knew, didn't you? I pressed, my heart pounding. What? No. She sounded flustered. I mean, I suspected something was off, but Lauren never told me anything directly. I wasn't sure if she was lying, but at that moment I didn't care. Look, Kelly, I'm not calling to point fingers. I just need the truth. Has she said anything to you? Mentioned anyone? Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear her weighing her loyalty to Lauren against whatever conscience she had left. There's a guy, Kelly finally admitted, her voice dropping. I don't know his name, but she's mentioned him a couple of times. Said he made her feel alive? Eric, I didn't know it had gone this far. I thought she was just venting. Venting? I repeated, disbelief dripping from my voice. She locked me out of my own bedroom, Kelly. She brought him into my house. Does that sound like venting to you? Kelly didn't answer. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. Thanks for your honesty, I said, my tone icy. Tell Lauren I'll be in touch when I'm ready. I hung up before she could respond. That was all I needed to hear. Whoever this guy was, he wasn't just some fling. He was the excuse Lauren had been waiting for, a ticket out of the life she'd decided wasn't good enough anymore. But she had underestimated me. That night, after settling into the cabin and tucking the kids into bed, I sat at the small kitchen table with a beer and my laptop. The cool night air seeped through the cabin's wooden walls, but I barely noticed. My mind was sharp, focused. It didn't take long to piece together a plan. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about taking back control. The first step was finding him. If Lauren wasn't going to give me answers, I'd find them myself. But I wasn't planning to handle it the way she probably imagined. Revenge wasn't about shouting or breaking things, it was about precision. It was about making her realize, with absolute clarity, that she'd underestimated the wrong man. She wanted excitement? Freedom? Fine. I'd give her a taste of both and let her see how it felt to live with the fallout. Finding him turned out to be easier than I expected. People like Lauren never cover their tracks as well as they think they do. Living a double life leaves breadcrumbs, and she'd been careless. It started with her email. Years ago, I'd helped her set up her Gmail account, linking it to an old backup email of mine. She never knew. I never had a reason to check, until now. Logging in felt like stepping into a room she'd forgotten to lock. What I found there left my stomach churning. Flirty messages, inside jokes, and vague innuendos. There were even reservations for a hotel she'd once claimed was for a networking event. It didn't take long to find a name: Ryan Carter. A generic-sounding name for a generic-looking guy, judging by the gym selfies and leather jacket pictures I found later. The emails painted a nauseating picture. Pet names, plans to meet while I was at work, even pictures of my kids, forwarded to him. That part made my blood boil. She had let this man, this stranger, peek into the life we had built together, turning what should have been sacred into a joke. I wanted to smash the laptop. But I didn't. Losing my temper wouldn't get me anywhere. I needed information, and that meant keeping my cool. I started digging. His name on social media led me straight to his public profile, where he proudly showcased himself as the human embodiment of a midlife crisis. Shirtless selfies with captions like, "Rise and grind." Hiking photos. A motorcycle. He looked younger than me, closer to Lauren's age. Fit, smug, and exactly the type of guy who thought wrecking a family made him irresistible. Scrolling through his posts, I found something more useful: locations. He wasn't just some random fling from out of town, he lived nearby. Less than 30 minutes from my house. Suddenly, everything clicked. The networking events, the girls' nights, the newfound gym obsession, it had all been orchestrated to make time for him. She hadn't just cheated, she turned our life into her playground. I stayed up late that night piecing together his patterns. He worked as a personal trainer, which explained the fitness obsession. Every Friday morning, he posted from the same coffee shop. Saturday nights, he hit up a local bar with his equally smug-looking friends. By the time the sun came up, I had everything I needed. But confronting him outright would have been too simple. Too easy. I wanted to dismantle his fantasy life piece by piece. Lauren needed to see what she'd thrown me away for. The next day, I focused on the kids. Max and Lily thought we were on a little vacation, and I wanted to keep it that way as long as I could. I spent the day playing games with them, hiking by the lake, and listening to their laughter. It grounded me. Reminded me why I was doing this. They deserved better. By evening, my plan was set. I found a babysitter, the older woman who managed the cabin rentals, and paid her to watch the kids for a few hours. Then I drove into town, parking a few blocks from Ryan's favorite bar. The place was loud, packed with people, and smelled like stale beer. It didn't take long to find him. He was near the pool table, surrounded by a group of guys who all looked like variations of him: tight shirts, cocky grins, overconfident. Ryan had his arm around a woman who definitely wasn't Lauren. She looked barely 25, giggling at every word he said. I stood by the wall, nursing a drink and watching. So, this was the man Lauren had blown up her life for, a serial flirt who probably thought commitment was a dirty word. He whispered something to the woman, making her laugh again, and I felt my disgust deepen. When he finally went to the bar to grab another drink, I made my move. "Ryan Carter?" I said, stepping up beside him. He turned, caught off guard. "Yeah? Who's asking?" For a moment, I didn't answer. I just stared at him, sizing him up. His smug expression, his self-satisfied air, everything about him screamed someone who coasted through life on looks and charm. The kind of guy who thought he was untouchable. I smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that said, "You have no idea what's coming." It made me sick. "My name's Eric," I said finally, my voice calm but deliberate. "We have a mutual connection." Ryan frowned, clearly confused. "I don't think I know you, man." "You don't," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "But you know my wife, Lauren." The color drained from his face so fast it was almost funny. His cocky demeanor crumbled, replaced by a panicked stiffness. "Oh, he stammered, his eyes darting around the bar. "Relax," I said, holding up a hand. "I'm not here to fight you." That threw him off even more. He glanced over his shoulder, maybe looking for backup, but his friends were too engrossed in their beers and their game of pool to notice us. "I just wanted to meet the guy who's been sneaking around with her," I continued, keeping my tone conversational. "I mean, it's not every day you get to shake hands with the man who wrecked your marriage. Look, man, Save it," I interrupted, cutting off whatever weak excuse he was about to offer. I already know everything. The emails. The meetups. The hotel reservations. I'm not here to make a scene. I just want to know one thing. Ryan swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. What? Does she know? I asked, tilting my head slightly. Does she know what? He asked, his voice strained. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice just enough that only he could hear me. Does she know about the other women? Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like she's the only one you've been keeping busy with. He stiffened, his eyes flickering nervously toward the young woman he'd been flirting with earlier. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he cleared his throat. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't, I said with a cold smile. Enjoy your night, Ryan. And don't worry, I'll make sure Lauren gets the full story. I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him standing there, pale and visibly shaken. I didn't need to do anything more. The seed was planted. Let him panic. Let him squirm. Let him wonder if Lauren was about to find out the truth about his extracurricular activities. That reckoning would come soon enough. The next morning, I sat at the edge of the dock behind the cabin, watching the mist rise from the still waters of the lake. Inside, Max and Lily were eating cereal and watching cartoons. Their laughter drifted faintly through the open window, a peaceful contrast to the storm still raging inside me. Lauren had texted me twice already. Lauren, are you ready to stop this nonsense yet? We need to talk about the kids. Stop dragging this out. Not a single word about what she had done. No apology. No remorse. Just arrogance, like I was the one being unreasonable for not playing along with her game. She didn't know I had met Ryan. She didn't know what I knew, or what I was planning. I pulled out my phone and typed a response, keeping it short and deliberate. Me. Let's talk. Her reply came almost immediately. Lauren. Finally. Where? Me. At the house. Be there at noon. Alone. The word alone was key. This was between me and her. I wasn't about to let Ryan, or anyone else, intrude on this. By 11:30, I had dropped the kids off with the cabin's caretaker, who had agreed to watch them again for a few hours. The drive to the house felt surreal. The streets were familiar, but everything about the journey felt foreign. The house wasn't home anymore. It was a crime scene. Her crime. When I pulled into the driveway, Lauren was already there, sitting on the front steps with her phone in hand, scrolling like she didn't have a care in the world. As I stepped out of the car, she looked up, her face tight with annoyance. About time, she said, standing up and crossing her arms. I've been waiting. I didn't reply. I walked past her, unlocking the front door. She followed, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floors. So, are you done playing the victim, or are we going to have an actual conversation? She snapped, her tone sharp and condescending. I turned to face her, leaning casually against the kitchen counter. Oh, we'll have a conversation. But first, I want to hear you say it. She frowned, clearly irritated. Say what? Say what you did. She rolled her eyes, exhaling in exasperation. Eric, don't be ridiculous. We both know why we're here. I don't need to spell it out for you. My jaw tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. No, I said, my voice low and steady. You do need to spell it out. I want to hear you admit it. For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then she let out a bitter laugh. Fine, she said, throwing up her hands dramatically. You want me to say it? I cheated on you. There. Happy now? Happy? The word ricocheted around in my head, absurd and hollow. No, I said quietly, shaking my head. But at least now you've said it. Lauren leaned against the dining table, her arms crossed, her posture defiant. Don't act like this is all on me, Eric. Our marriage has been dead for years. You're always working, always distracted. You've been checked out for ages. What did you expect me to do? Sit around and wait for you to notice me? Her words hit me like a slap, but I kept my face neutral. So this is my fault? I asked, my voice level. It's not about fault, she snapped. It's about reality. You stopped trying, Eric. You stopped being exciting. I needed more. Ryan, I said, raising an eyebrow. You mean the guy who was hitting on another woman at the bar last night? Her mouth fell open slightly, but no words came out. Yeah, I continued, my voice cold. I met him. Nice guy, really. Seemed busy, though. The color drained from her face. For the first time, she didn't have a snarky reply. Too busy to mention he's been sleeping with half the women in town, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Lauren's face flushed instantly. That's not true, she said, but her voice wavered. Isn't it? I asked, taking a step closer. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you blew up our family for a guy who doesn't even take you seriously. She looked away, her jaw tightening, and for the first time, I saw something other than arrogance in her expression. Doubt. I didn't come here to fight, I continued, easing back just enough to keep control. I came here to tell you what's going to happen next. Her head snapped back toward me, her eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done playing games, I said firmly. I've already talked to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. And I'm going to make damn sure the kids stay with me. Lauren let out a sharp laugh, but it was brittle, forced. You think you can just take them from me? Good luck with that, Eric. No court is going to side with you over their mother. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened an app I'd downloaded the night before. You sure about that? I asked, holding it up so she could see the screen. Her eyes flicked to the phone, and for the first time, I saw real panic flash across her face. What is that? She demanded. Proof, I said simply. Proof of everything. The texts, the emails, the hotel reservations. Even a video I took last night of Ryan flirting with that girl at the bar. And trust me, Lauren, the courts are going to be very interested in how dedicated you've been to this family. Her face turned ghostly pale. You wouldn't, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Try me. For a long moment, the room was silent. Lauren stared at me, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Then, she did something I hadn't expected. She laughed, not the bitter, annoyed laugh I'd heard before, but something darker. Fine, she said, her voice cold and sharp. You want to play dirty? Let's play dirty. But don't think for a second that I'm going to let you take my kids away from me. Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I didn't let it show. I held her gaze, my expression calm and unflinching. They're not your kids, I said quietly. They're ours. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect them from you. She didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed her bag, stormed out, and slammed the door behind her. The moment the door slammed shut, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The silence in the house was heavy, suffocating. I wanted to feel victorious, like I had just taken the upper hand in some grand battle. But the truth was, my hands were shaking, and my stomach was in knots. This wasn't a fight I wanted. But it was a fight I had no choice but to win. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my phone's screen. All the evidence I'd gathered was neatly stored in a folder: texts, emails, screenshots, and the video of Ryan cozying up to that woman at the bar. It was damning, a collection I'd hand over to my lawyer first thing Monday morning. But this wasn't just about legal strategies or custody battles. This was about reclaiming my life from the wreckage Lauren had created. I opened Facebook. I hadn't posted anything in years. Social media wasn't really my thing. But this was different. This wasn't about airing my dirty laundry. This was about setting the stage. Scrolling through old photos, I found one of Lauren and me from a friend's wedding 2 years ago. It was a perfect couple shot, her arm draped over my shoulder, both of us laughing like we didn't have a care in the world. We looked happy. Real. I added a caption. Funny how a photo can lie. Behind the smiles are years of deceit. Behind the laughter, betrayal. behind her hand on my shoulder, a knife perfectly aimed. But don't worry, the truth always comes out. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. The comments started rolling in almost immediately. Friends, coworkers, even some of Lauren's family chimed in. Most were shocked, some were supportive, and a few were downright nosy, fishing for details. I didn't reply to any of them. That wasn't the point. The point was Lauren. She had spent years curating the image of a perfect wife and mother. I wanted her to know that I wasn't afraid to tear that facade down. By the time I put my phone down, my head was pounding. Days of sleepless nights and the weight of everything were starting to catch up to me. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, letting the crisp autumn air wash over me. The neighborhood was quiet. The kind of suburban silence that used to feel comforting but now felt hollow, mocking. This wasn't over. The fight was only beginning. And I wasn't planning to lose. I hadn't made it far when my phone buzzed again. It was Kelly. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I couldn't shake the memory of her voice the last time we spoke, the hesitation, the guilt. She might not have been innocent in all this, but she clearly knew more than she'd let on. "Eric," she said the moment I answered, her voice hushed but urgent. "What the hell is going on? Lauren just called me, and she's losing it. She said you're trying to ruin her life." "Ruin her life?" I replied, my voice cold. "She did that all on her own. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." Kelly sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. "Look, I get it. What she did was awful, and you have every right to be angry. But airing it all out on social media? That's not going to help anyone, especially not the kids." Her words stung, though I didn't let it show. "Don't lecture me, Kelly. You knew. Maybe not everything, but you knew enough, and you said nothing. So don't pretend to care about the kids now." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, almost contrite. "You're right. I should have said something. I didn't know how. Lauren's always been intense. And honestly, I didn't think she'd go this far." "She didn't just go far," I said bitterly. "She burned it all to the ground." "I'm sorry, Eric." "I really am," Kelly said, her tone genuine. Then she hesitated. "But you need to be careful. Lauren's not going to take this lying down. You know how she is. She doesn't lose, not without a fight." I smirked, though there was no humor in it. "Good. Let her fight. I'm ready." Kelly didn't respond right away. When she did, her tone was heavier, more serious. "Just don't let this consume you, okay? The kids need you. Don't lose sight of that." The call ended shortly after, but her words stuck with me. Max and Lily were my priority, always. But Kelly didn't understand that this fight was for them, for their safety, their future, and the life they deserved. When I walked back into the house, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Lauren. "Lauren, you want to play dirty? Fine. But don't forget, Eric, I know things about you too. You're not as perfect as you like to pretend. Let's see how everyone reacts when I start telling my side of the story." A part of me wanted to laugh. Of course, she tried to twist this into a war of perception, make herself the victim. But unlike her, I didn't have skeletons in my closet. My biggest crime was trusting her. I typed a quick reply. "Me. Tell whoever you want. But remember this, I'm not the one who cheated. I'm not the one who lied. And I'm not the one who brought a stranger into our kids' lives. Keep digging that hole, Lauren. I'll be waiting at the bottom." I hit send and tossed the phone onto the counter. This wasn't just about me and Lauren anymore. This was about control over the truth, the narrative, and the future. And I was done letting her call the shots. As I stood in the kitchen, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a simmering resolve. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Lauren wanted a fight, and she'd get one. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about taking my life back. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Dan. He was a no-nonsense type with a receding hairline and a gaze so sharp it could cut through stone. He'd come highly recommended by a friend who'd survived a brutal divorce, and within 5 minutes of sitting in his office, I knew why. "So let me get this straight," Dan said, leaning back in his chair. "Your wife cheated on you, repeatedly. She brought her lover into your home. And now she's threatening to fight for custody? That's the gist of it," I said, my tone dry. Dan nodded slowly, tapping his pen against the edge of his desk. "Do you have evidence?" I pulled out my phone and slid it across the desk. "Texts, emails, screenshots, and a video of her lover hitting on someone else at a bar. It's all there." Dan picked up the phone, scrolling through the folder I'd meticulously prepared. His eyebrows shot up a couple of times, and he let out a low whistle at one point. "This is substantial," he said finally, setting the phone down. "The courts won't look kindly on her behavior, especially if you can prove she was neglecting the kids to carry on this affair. Do you have anything showing she was absent or unavailable for them?" "Not yet," I admitted. Dan's expression didn't falter. "Then we'll get it. Judges prioritize the best interests of the kids, and based on what you've shown me, we're already building a strong case. But Eric, this process isn't going to be easy or quick. Are you ready for that?" I met his gaze, my voice steady. "I don't have a choice. I'll do whatever it takes." Dan nodded. "Good. Because that's what it's going to take, everything." As I left Dan's office, the weight of the situation bore down on me again. This was just the beginning, but for the first time, I felt like I had a fighting chance. Lauren could threaten all she wanted, but this wasn't her game anymore. This was mine. "I wouldn't be surprised if there's more to dig up," I said, leaning back in the chair. "She's been distracted for months." Dan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "All right, here's the plan. First, we file for divorce, citing infidelity. Then we start building your custody case. The goal is to show that you're the more stable parent, the one who puts the kids' well-being first." I leaned forward. "And if she tries to smear me? Make me out to be the bad guy?" Dan smirked. "Let her try. If she throws dirt, we throw evidence. The courts don't care about petty drama, they care about facts. And from what I've seen so far, the facts are on your side." It was exactly what I needed to hear. Before I left, Dan handed me a list of tasks: gather more evidence, document every interaction with Lauren, and most importantly, stay calm. "Don't give her anything she can use against you," he warned. "No angry texts, no shouting matches. Keep it professional." Easier said than done, but I was determined to follow his advice. When I got back to the cabin that afternoon, Max and Lily were playing by the lake. Max was skipping stones, each one gliding across the water like tiny miracles. Lily was building a lopsided rock castle on the shore, her little face scrunched in concentration. For a moment, I just stood there, watching them. They looked so happy, so carefree. The weight of what I stood to lose hit me all over again. "Daddy, look!" Lily called, holding up a perfectly round stone. "It's a magic rock." I walked over and knelt beside her. "What makes it magic?" She tilted her head, thinking hard. "It makes wishes come true," she said with a grin. I smiled, ruffling her hair. "Then I'd better keep it safe, huh?" She nodded seriously as I slipped the rock into my pocket. It wasn't magic, of course. But in that moment, I wished for nothing more than to protect her and Max from what was coming. That evening, after the kids were asleep, my phone lit up. "Lauren." I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally, I swiped to pick up. "What do you want, Lauren?" I said, skipping any pretense of civility. "This has gone far enough, Eric," she snapped. "Dragging lawyers into this? Posting cryptic crap on Facebook? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me?" I shot back. "You cheated on me, Lauren. You lied. You betrayed me. And now you're acting like I'm the problem? Do you even hear yourself?" She let out an exasperated sigh. "Oh, spare me the martyr act. You think just because you work late and pay the bills, that makes you a good husband? Newsflash, Eric, I was miserable. And if you weren't so blind, you would have seen that. Right, I said, my voice thick with sarcasm. Because the logical response to being miserable is to sleep with a personal trainer and blow up your family. Her tone turned icy. You know what? Fine. Play the victim if it makes you feel better. But you're not taking my kids away from me. I'll fight you, Eric. And I'll win. Good luck with that, I said calmly. Because the moment this goes to court, the judge is going to see exactly what kind of mother you've been. There was a long pause on her end. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, more dangerous. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? I don't think, Lauren. I know. I hung up before she could say anything else. The next day, I started putting the rest of my plan into motion. The first step was hiring a private investigator. If there was more to uncover about Lauren or Ryan, I wanted it. Every lie, every betrayal, every dirty little secret. Next, I began piecing together my own timeline. I combed through old texts and emails, cataloging every moment that didn't add up. I reached out to a few mutual friends, carefully feeling them out. Some were supportive, shocked by what I told them. Others seemed hesitant, likely swayed by Lauren's version of events. She was already spinning her web. That morning, I'd seen a post on her Instagram, a smiling selfie with the caption, "Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones you never expected to fight, but I'm stronger than they think." It turned my stomach, but I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story. Not this time. The days that followed were a strange mix of calm and chaos. On the surface, everything was peaceful. Max and Lily were adjusting well to life at the cabin, spending their days swimming in the lake and playing hide-and-seek in the woods. But beneath that calm, the war with Lauren was escalating. Her social media posts grew more pointed. While she didn't name me outright, her message was clear to anyone who knew us. She posted old pictures of herself with the kids, captioned with saccharine lines like, "A mother's love never wavers, no matter how hard others try to break her spirit." It was infuriating, but I refused to take the bait. The fight wasn't happening online, it was happening in courtrooms and behind closed doors. Lauren had declared war, but she underestimated me. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I was preparing for the battle of my life, and I had no intention of losing. She was playing the victim, weaving a careful narrative to make herself look like the doting, devoted mother while subtly painting me as the villain. But I wasn't sitting idle. The private investigator I hired, let's call him Mike, was good. Very good. Within 3 days he handed me a detailed report on Ryan Carter that read like a soap opera script. It turned out Ryan wasn't just a personal trainer, he was a personal disaster. First, there were his finances, maxed out credit cards, unpaid loans, and a pending eviction notice for his apartment. Then came the women. Mike uncovered at least 4 other women Ryan was seeing, each one oblivious to the others. And the cherry on top? Ryan had a record. Nothing major, just a couple of arrests for drunk and disorderly conduct, but it painted a pretty clear picture of the kind of man he was. Mike even managed to get surveillance photos of Ryan meeting one of his other girlfriends at a bar. The timestamp? 2 days after I walked out of my house. I stared at the report for a long time, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Lauren had risked everything, our marriage, our family, for this guy. A walking, talking red flag factory. But the anger didn't consume me. If anything, it sharpened my focus. I wasn't just going to expose Lauren, I was going to make her regret every single lie she told. Later that week, I met with Dan to go over the next steps. I handed him the report from Mike along with copies of Lauren's texts and emails. Dan flipped through the pages, nodding as he read. "This is gold," he said, smirking. "Ryan's financial issues, the other women, his arrests, it all adds up to one thing: poor judgment on Lauren's part. The courts won't look kindly on her bringing someone like this into her kids' lives." "What's our next move?" I asked. "We file," Dan said firmly. "We're going for primary custody, with supervised visitation for her until she proves she's stable. Based on what you've given me, We have a very strong case. And if she fights back? Dan smiled, a sharp, wolfish grin. Let her. She's fighting uphill, and she knows it. She might try to play dirty, but you've got the facts on your side. Facts always win. Lauren didn't take the news well. When she was served the divorce papers, she called me immediately. Her voice was a mix of anger and panic. Are you serious, Eric? She snapped. You're actually doing this? Dead serious, I said, keeping my voice calm. This is what happens when you destroy a family, Lauren. Actions have consequences. Oh, spare me the lecture, she hissed. You think you're so righteous, so perfect. But I've got news for you, you're not. And if you think I'm just going to roll over and let you take my kids, you're delusional. They're not just your kids, I shot back. And I'm not trying to take them from you. I'm trying to protect them, from your lies, your selfishness, and from that loser you've been sneaking around with. Ryan isn't a loser, she spat. You don't know him. Oh, I know plenty, I said, my voice sharp. Like the fact that he's drowning in debt. Or that he's juggling multiple women, just like he juggles his unpaid bills. Or how about his record? You didn't know about that, did you? There was a long silence. I could almost hear her brain scrambling to catch up, to process the reality I just dropped on her. Don't believe everything you hear, she said finally, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Oh, I don't believe everything, I said coolly. Just the stuff backed up by photos, court records, and eyewitness accounts. Face it, Lauren, you gambled and you lost. She didn't reply. Instead, she hung up on me. But Lauren wasn't done. I knew her too well to think she'd go down quietly, and sure enough, the next day she made her move. It started with an email. A long, rambling message accusing me of being an absent father who never put the family first. She claimed I was only filing for custody to punish her, and insisted that the kids would be better off with her. But that wasn't the worst part. A few hours later, I got a call from Kelly. Her voice was tense. Eric, you need to see this. She sent me a screenshot of a post Lauren had made in a local moms group on Facebook. It read, I'm going through a really tough time right now. My husband is trying to take my kids away from me, using lies and manipulation to make me look like the bad guy. If anyone knows a good family lawyer, please DM me. I just want to protect my babies. The comments were exactly what you'd expect, a flood of sympathy from strangers who had no idea what the truth was. People calling me a monster, telling Lauren to stay strong, offering advice and support. It was infuriating, but I didn't take the bait. Instead, I sent the screenshot to Dan. Perfect, he said when I called him. She just handed us more evidence. The courts don't like parents who use their kids to score points online. Keep documenting everything. The war had begun. And I wasn't planning to lose. The more she tries to play the victim, the more obvious it'll be to the court that she's grasping at straws, Dan had said. Just stick to the plan, Eric. Let her dig her own grave. That night, as I tucked Max and Lily into bed, the weight of everything pressed down on me. Lily clung to her stuffed unicorn, her eyelids fluttering closed, while Max whispered, Dad, are we going to stay here forever? I knelt beside his bed, brushing the hair from his forehead. I don't know, buddy, I said honestly. But no matter what happens, I'm going to make sure you and your sister are safe. I promise. As I sat alone in the dark living room later, the promise I'd made to Max echoed in my mind. This wasn't about beating Lauren anymore. It wasn't about revenge, anger, or even justice. It was about them. Max and Lily deserved better than the chaos Lauren had created. They deserved stability, love, and a future free from lies. I was going to give it to them, even if it meant burning everything else to the ground. Lauren wasn't just a liar, she was a strategist. A manipulative, calculating opportunist who knew how to spin herself as the hero in her own twisted story. And when people like her feel cornered, they don't surrender. They escalate. 2 days after her pity post in the moms group, I got an email from her lawyer. She wasn't just defending herself, she was filing for full custody. The audacity was almost funny. Almost. The email outlined her claims. I was emotionally neglectful, controlling, and unfit to provide a stable environment for the kids. She even threw in that my impulsive decision to take the kids from their home without consulting her showed a pattern of irrational and erratic behavior. I sat in the cabin's living room, staring at the email as my jaw tightened and my fists clenched. She was twisting everything, my fight to protect the kids, my escape from her toxic mess, and turning it into a narrative where I was the villain. My first instinct was to call her, to yell, to let her have it for dragging the kids into this circus. But Dan's words echoed in my mind, "Don't give her anything she can use against you." So instead of calling Lauren, I called Dan. "Expected this," he said, his voice calm, almost casual. "When people like Lauren feel cornered, they hit hard. They try to distract from their behavior by putting the other person on trial." "What do we do?" I asked. "We fight fire with facts," Dan replied. "We show the court exactly who she is, exactly what she's done, and exactly why the kids are better off with you. I'll draft the response, but I need you to stay focused. Don't let her get into your head." He was right. This wasn't about me or my pride. This was about Max and Lily. The next few days blurred together in a storm of paperwork and preparation. Dan filed the divorce papers and our petition for primary custody, attaching every shred of evidence we had, texts, emails, the private investigator's report, everything. Meanwhile, Lauren continued her campaign. She reached out to mutual friends, painting me as a vindictive husband using the kids as pawns. She even had the audacity to show up at the cabin unannounced one afternoon, pounding on the door like a madwoman. "Eric, open the door!" she shouted, her voice muffled through the wood. The kids were at the kitchen table, working on a puzzle. I told them to stay put and went to the door, cracking it open just enough to see her face. "What do you want, Lauren?" I asked flatly. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. She didn't look like the composed, cunning woman I had married. She looked frantic. Desperate. "You can't do this," she hissed. "You can't just take them and hide here like some kind of coward." "I didn't take them," I said calmly. "They're my kids too. And I didn't hide, I protected them." "From you?" "For me?" she said, her voice dripping with disbelief. "That's rich, Eric. Do you really think you're some kind of hero? You've been checked out of this marriage for years. You think paying bills and showing up to soccer games makes you a good dad? You don't even know how to connect with them." Her words stung, but I kept my voice steady. "You're right, I wasn't perfect. But at least I didn't bring a stranger into our house. At least I didn't lie to them, to you, or to myself. So spare me the lecture on parenting, Lauren." Her face twisted in rage. "You're going to regret this. You think you're better than me? You think the court's going to hand you custody just because you've got some stupid emails? I'm their mother, Eric. No one's going to take them away from me." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the kids wouldn't hear. "This isn't about you, Lauren. It's about them. And if you really cared about them, you'd stop dragging them into your mess." For a moment, she just stared at me, her chest heaving. I could see the storm of emotions brewing behind her eyes, anger, desperation, fear. But I didn't flinch. "Go home, Lauren," I said firmly, stepping back and shutting the door. She stood on the porch for a long moment before storming off, her footsteps heavy on the gravel driveway. I leaned against the closed door, the adrenaline still coursing through me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Lauren wasn't going down without a fight, but neither was I. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. This was about protecting Max and Lily, no matter the cost. Lauren could escalate all she wanted. I was ready. Lauren stormed off, her heels clicking angrily against the porch as she made her way to her car. I watched her drive away, my heart pounding. I didn't feel victorious, I felt drained. That night, I sat down with Max and Lily. It wasn't a conversation I wanted to have, but it was one I couldn't avoid any longer. "Hey guys," I said, sitting on the floor with them as they worked on their puzzle. Can we talk for a minute? Max looked up, his brow furrowed. Are we in trouble? No, buddy, I said quickly. You're not in trouble. I need to talk to you about Mommy. Lily's eyes widened. Is Mommy coming here? No, I said gently. Not right now, but things are going to be different for a while. Max frowned. Because you and Mommy had a fight? I nodded slowly. Yeah, but it's more than that. Mommy and I aren't going to live together anymore. And I know that's hard to understand, but I want you to know it's not your fault. It's not about you or Lily. We both love you very much, and that's never going to change. Max didn't say anything. He just stared down at the puzzle, his little hands clenching into fists. Lily, on the other hand, crawled into my lap, her unicorn tucked under her arm. Will we still see Mommy? She asked softly. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Yes, but it might not be as often. We're still figuring everything out, but I promise I'll keep you both safe no matter what. She seemed to accept that, snuggling closer to me. Max, however, was still quiet. Finally, he looked up, his eyes filled with something that wasn't sadness or anger, something deeper. Did Mommy do something bad? He asked quietly. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How do you answer that without breaking their world? She made some mistakes, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. People make mistakes sometimes, even grown-ups. Max didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway, turning back to the puzzle in front of him. The next morning, I got a text from Kelly. Kelly, you need to see this. Jessica's unraveling. Attached was a screenshot of Jessica's latest post in the moms group. Divorce is the hardest thing a mother can go through, especially when your ex is trying to turn your own children against you. Stay strong, mamas. Never let anyone take away your babies. Below the post were dozens of comments offering sympathy, calling me a manipulative narcissist and a terrible father. Jessica was good, she knew how to pull at people's heartstrings. But the cracks were starting to show. Kelly's follow-up message came through seconds later. Kelly, she's losing control. Keep going. You've got this. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than anger or exhaustion, hope. Jessica's web of lies was starting to collapse. And when it did, I'd be ready to pick up the pieces, for Max, for Lily, and for myself. The courtroom smelled like stale coffee and wood polish, but the tension in the air was electric. Lauren sat across from me, dressed in a tailored blazer, her expression carefully composed. She was trying to play the role of the wronged mother, hands folded neatly in her lap, lips pressed into a practiced frown. I, on the other hand, was done pretending. Dan leaned over and whispered, Remember, stay calm. Let her dig her own grave. We've got this. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the judge as she entered and called the room to order. Lauren's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman with a piercing voice, wasted no time crafting a narrative. Your Honor, she began. My client is a dedicated mother who has been blindsided by her husband's erratic behavior. He removed the children from their home without her consent and has since used aggressive tactics to alienate her from them. This is a clear case of parental manipulation. Lauren nodded solemnly, as if every word were gospel. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from reacting. This was all part of the game, painting me as the villain to distract from her own actions. But Dan had prepared me for this. When it was his turn, Dan stood, exuding calm confidence. Your Honor, he began. What my client seeks today is not vengeance or retaliation, but stability for his children. The evidence we've submitted will show that Mrs. Green's actions have repeatedly jeopardized the emotional and physical well-being of the children. This is not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact. He placed a thick folder of evidence on the judge's desk, and then it began. For the next 2 hours, Dan systematically dismantled Lauren's facade. First came the texts and emails. Dan projected them onto a screen for the courtroom to see, conversations between Lauren and Ryan that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Flirty messages, plans to meet while I was at work, even mentions of the kids as if they were accessories in her double life. Lauren's lawyer tried to object, but the judge overruled her, waving for Dan to continue. Next came the private investigator's report, Ryan's financial troubles, his string of other women, and his arrest record. Dan highlighted everything, painting a clear picture of the kind of man Lauren had chosen to bring into the kids' lives. Finally, Dan turned to the social media posts, the carefully crafted messages Lauren had used to garner sympathy while painting me as the bad guy. "Your Honor," Dan said, his voice steady, "this is a calculated effort to manipulate public perception. My client has remained focused on the well-being of the children, while Mrs. Green has used social media to fuel a narrative that distracts from her own actions. These posts serve no purpose other than to escalate tensions and create instability for the children." The courtroom was silent. Lauren shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her forced serenity starting to crack. When Dan finished, he sat down beside me, leaning over to whisper, "We've got her." I glanced at Lauren. For the first time, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her carefully constructed story was unraveling piece by piece. This wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the verge of something real: justice. One particularly damning message was displayed for the court, a message where Lauren bragged about how I would never find out. Her lawyer leapt to object, but the judge silenced her with a curt wave. Next came the private investigator's report. Dan meticulously walked the court through every detail: Ryan's crushing debt, his multiple relationships, his arrests. The photos of Ryan at the bar with another woman, time-stamped and dated, drove the point home. Lauren shifted uncomfortably in her seat, the confidence she had clung to like armor visibly cracking. But the real blow came when Dan introduced the witness statements. 2 of our mutual friends had agreed to testify. Both confirmed that Lauren had been distant and distracted for months, frequently leaving the kids with babysitters or me while she worked late. One of the witnesses, a mom from Max's soccer team, testified that she had seen Lauren and Ryan together in a parking lot, holding hands. By the time Dan finished presenting, Lauren's lawyer looked like she'd aged a decade. When it was Lauren's turn to speak, she stood, her hands trembling slightly. "Your Honor," she began, her voice wavering, "I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but that doesn't make me a bad mother. Everything I've done has been out of love for my children." She glanced at me briefly, her expression bitter. "Eric is painting me as a monster, but he's no saint. He's cold, distant, emotionally unavailable. I felt invisible in my own marriage." Her voice cracked, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then she made her fatal mistake. "And as for Ryan," she continued, her tone hardening, "he's not the person Eric is making him out to be. Yes, we're friends, but that's all we are. Eric is twisting things to hurt me, and it's not fair." Dan didn't flinch. Calmly, he stood and held up a printed email. "Your Honor," he said, "this is a confirmation of a hotel reservation made by Mrs. Green under her name. The second guest? Ryan Carter. Date? 3 weeks ago." He placed the document on the judge's desk. "This is not friendship. This is deceit." Lauren's face went pale. Her lawyer buried her face in her hands. By the time the hearing concluded, it was clear to everyone in the room where the truth lay. The judge didn't deliberate long. She ruled in my favor. I was granted primary custody of Max and Lily, with Lauren receiving supervised visitation until she could demonstrate stability in her life. The divorce proceedings were still ongoing, but this victory felt monumental. As the judge delivered her ruling, Lauren sat frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. When the hearing ended, she stormed out of the courtroom without so much as a glance in my direction. That evening, I sat on the cabin porch, watching Max and Lily chase fireflies in the yard. Max was laughing, his arms flailing as he tried to catch one, while Lily twirled in circles, clutching her unicorn to her chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. Lauren would still be a part of their lives, that was inevitable, but her control, her manipulation, her lies, they were gone. They had crumbled under the weight of her own choices. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Kelly. Kelly. Saw the ruling. I'm happy for you, Eric. You deserve this. I stared at the message for a moment before typing a reply. Me. Thanks. The kids deserved it more. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I stood by the lake, looking out over the still, glassy water. I thought about everything that had happened, everything I'd lost, and everything I'd gained. This wasn't the life I had envisioned when I married Lauren. I never thought I'd end up here, raising 2 kids on my own, rebuilding from the ground up. But in a strange way, I felt free. Lauren's betrayal had broken me. But it had also forced me to become something stronger, a better father, a better man. As I stood there, I reached into my pocket and pulled out Lily's magic stone. I held it in my palm, feeling the smooth, cool surface against my skin. I made a wish, not for revenge, not for justice, but for peace. For Max and Lily to grow up happy and safe. For the strength to keep moving forward, no matter what. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that wish might actually come true. The war was over. And I had won.